Hey, hello everyone. This is Dr. Joseph Capps coming back to you again for our podcast and our YouTube channel, Dancing with the Darkness. Once again, if you're new to this channel or new to this podcast, we basically are giving a raw, unfiltered account of what it's like to live with CPTSD, all of those things that go along with it. We also talk about solutions, and we talk about coping strategies, and we talk about ways to heal from a lifetime commitment of trauma and cumulative stress. And we have things that we discuss in regard to some pretty amazing things that have been created, a protocol and some other things that are have been developed and are actually showing some really good signs of getting some serious relief, and not only that, but also as a tool for other therapists to use at their disposal to help with their treatment of individuals with CPTSD. It starts off with the word complex for a reason, and so it is absolutely the definition of complex for sure. If those of you listening today have CPTSD, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the whole point of this podcast is for me to walk alongside you 100%, because I have spent 50 years on this earth dealing with the effects of CPTSD, and it has manifested itself in every aspect of my life, and it has affected my life. It has affected my decision making. It has even been the 100% catalyst for me to get into a role of being a healer myself and being a doctor and doing all of these things. So there's good and there's bad that have come from this, but as always, we give, as a man of faith, I give all credit to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ that knew me in the womb. And I know that I have been crafted specifically to do this. And so, as Paul says in the Bible, we need to embrace that. We need to glorify in tribulations and in stresses and in, even in trauma, if we can take it and turn it into something good and make our pain purposeful. If you're new to this channel, or if you're an existing listener, or you're an existing viewer on YouTube, the only way that we can get the word out, the only way that we can spread the mission and the purpose and to help people with CPTSD is for you to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and to subscribe to the podcast. And you can do that on either Podbean or you can do it on Spotify. We appreciate that very much. We are just trying to get the word out. There are millions, literally millions of people that walk this earth suffering with CPTSD, and we are trying to do one very, very small part of the healing process for these individuals, and to also make my life purposeful in my journey to not only help individuals, but also to help them understand that my strength comes from my faith, and that it is God, number one, that has given me the ability to even attempt a healing journey, to even attempt doing what I'm doing with this podcast and also with the YouTube channel. So we've been talking about in the past couple videos about emotional flashbacks, and this is such a huge part of CPTSD. It is an unbelievably huge part of what we go through, and it's based on so many precursors. There are so many layers to this onion, depending on how much trauma you've been exposed to, how much abuse you've been exposed to. The ramifications can be pretty extensive, not only from just the experience that you had as children, but also, we keep doing things in our life. We keep having dysfunctional, unhealthy relationships. We keep ending up in positions where we're being abused, whether it's by a partner or a boss at work or a coworker or even people that call themselves our friends. We end up being in bad spots. And then the flip side of that, we also can end up being abusive to the people around us, and sometimes you're not even conscious of it, which is one of the things that I'm going to talk about today. One of the really important things that we need to come to terms with is that if we're going to talk about emotional flashbacks, uh, sometimes we need to realize that we may not even understand that we're having an emotional flashback. Sometimes by the time we're in the process of having this episode, and our body and our nervous system and everything is reacting to this, it's already too late, and we're in the throes of whether it be fight or flight, freeze or fawn. There's all of these trauma reactions that we do based on our nervous system and how we're designed. And so sometimes we end up being in the throes of these adrenaline fueled responses or these fear-based responses, and it's already too late, and we're past the point of prevention at this point, and now we're literally doing crisis management. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we can be a little bit more hyper vigilant and realizing that these things are happening. It's amazing to me that I have such hypervigilance when it comes to everything around me, whether it's environment, whether it's where I sit in a restaurant or where I sit in church, or, I'm very aware of perceived threat or threats that may not even be there. And that's the hypervigilance in a nutshell. Based on my experiences in life, I've been kind of conditioned and programmed that 99.9% of the population is trying to hurt me, okay, or trying to hurt the people around me. So I can be very, very aware, very hypervigilant in this environment, but yet I'm not hypervigilant a lot of times to what's happening to me and to my own body, and also the ramifications of that with my family. Because by the time I'm in one of these flashbacks, I have already started reacting outward. And sometimes we don't realize that we are affecting those around us as well, and may even be causing them trauma. So we have to be very, very aware of this. You don't necessarily have to name it as a flashback. We can call it a re-experiencing. We can call it a repressed memory. We can call it anything that you want to call it. But there's a part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, that it likes to have some logic and some reason, and it likes to have labels sometimes, so that, here's my enemy, I can label it, and this is what I need to fight against. And so that's why it is important for us to go ahead and give it a name. And so we can call it a flashback, we can call it a re-experiencing, we can call it whatever, but it helps to have a name to it, because it helps our brain wrap around the adrenal response, maybe the more primal response, or the amygdala hijacking part of the episode. It helps the other parts of our brain kind of tune in and say, okay, this isn't an unseen force that I have no way to deal with. We're going to call it what it is, and we're going to face it head on. And so that's why I feel like it's very important to go ahead and label these things. And like I said, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it an emotional flashback. You can call it a re-experiencing, whatever works for you. You can call it the big bad wolf for all I care. It doesn't matter. But we can really help ourselves by giving ourselves an enemy. It's the same thing in any therapeutic circle. I remember, when I treated eating disorders for 5 years, and I had this monster stuffed animal that I would put in a chair when I was talking to families, and I was trying to help them understand, the anorexia or the bulimia or whatever it is. It's this monster sitting over here in the chair. And so that gave that entire family the ability to see the illness outside of their daughter or their son or whoever had the eating disorder. And so now they all had something that they could fight together. And so that's just an example of how we can wrap our brain around having a common foe and being able to use the faculties and the good things about ourselves to be able to battle it out with that entity and be able to be successful at employing coping strategies and having tools in our toolboxes and things that we are confident we can use in our battle with these flashbacks and the other things that happen with CPTSD. So this video today, a lot is going to be about awareness, and then we're going to talk about some more coping strategies that kind of go with that awareness. So let's look at what it looks like. Some clues. Okay, so let's play detective for a second and let's think about some clues that kind of help us understand that we're having one of these experiences. A lot of times, if you name it a flashback, a lot of times we don't even realize the flash that's already happened putting us into this episode. One of the parts of managing flashback is, like I said, naming the experience. And the reason why this gives us a little bit of relief right off the get-go. We're like, oh, okay, having a flashback. Okay, so we're literally grounding ourselves. We're literally giving ourselves the ability to realize that we are not in the actual episode, that we are safe. Those other coping strategies we went over in the first couple videos, these are employed very well at this stage where we're recognizing, okay, I'm in a flashback, I'm having a reaction to it, so now I know what I need to do. Okay, so there's some awareness there, there's some logic there, there's the ability to be able to fight this thing, and you're not fighting yourself, you're literally fighting something external, something that happened to you. This doesn't identify you, it's not your identity, it's something that happened to you. So this gives us the ability to do that, and by doing this, it gives us the ability to employ the coping strategies that we're talking about to deal with these emotional flashbacks, okay? Because you're a lot more confident to use these tools, and you're going to get to a point where it almost becomes instinctual, it becomes habitual, and this is part of that flashback management that we're going to work on, okay? And so we have the primal reaction to the flashback that's automatic. So now we have this automatic deployment of assets that we're going to have to counteract this. And it goes a long way. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that we're never going to have emotional flashbacks anymore. But I tell you what, it is a tremendous benefit, a tremendous change when we are able to manage them, when we are able to realize what it is, we are able to employ or deploy these tactics to deal with this flashback, and now it's manageable. Okay, so I want you to think about one of our steps to recovery is admitting we're powerless, right? Well, we're literally giving ourselves some power. We're giving ourselves some control over situations that have always been uncontrollable. Okay, that's whole part of the flashback experience that is so scary, that makes us have such a bad reaction, is that we're out of control. We have no control. Okay, so we feel like we have no power, and so now we're going to deploy some power here. We're going to have some abilities to fight back with things that work, things that benefit us, that make us healthier, and it's just all around a much better way to deal with this. So I want you to think about some things that we need to recognize when we start having one of these emotional flashbacks. And often what happens with CPTSD, because of the way we were brought up, because of the way we were abused, is that we feel very small. If you're in a situation where the walls kind of feel like they're closing in on you and you feel like you're just very small, that you're helpless, that you're hopeless. These are some things that happen when we have an intense flashback, and it magnifies. It gets so much more, okay? The magnification of being ashamed, okay? That, we can get to the point where we loathe ourselves so much that we are so ashamed that we just don't even want to go show our face anywhere. I mean, this is how that isolation happens. This is how that deep depression starts happening, is that this shame is just so much, and we feel so small, and we just feel so worthless that we end up isolating ourselves. We feel fragile. We feel like we're on edge. I call this podcast Dancing with the Darkness, literally, because that's what it feels like. It's like you're dancing with this unseen force of darkness. And one little move, and that darkness can take over. So it's like you're on edge, and it's very, very scary. Okay, it's a lack of control, it's a lack of confidence, it's tremendous fear, anxiety, guilt, shame. All of these things are weaponized against you internally, based on how you've been conditioned, and so it's very, very difficult. We feel delicate. We just feel like we could be easily crushed. It's just, if you're watching this and you have CPTSD, I don't really need to explain it to you, but for those of you that are trying to learn about CPTSD, or you're trying to learn how to help a loved one with it, I need you to understand that the biggest, strongest individual, somebody who's literally a deadly person, that has a skill set of violence, CPTSD can break them down into a helpless, tiny little child that cannot defend themselves. And so you need to understand just how huge a thing this is with people with CPTSD. It is really, really scary for us. It's very, very painful for us. Okay. So I want you to understand that this is not some basic little thing. A lot of times, these individuals get put in boxes in mental health, and because it's so hard to treat CPTSD that we'll end up being diagnosed with bipolar or borderline personality, dissociative order. There's all kinds of things that can happen, and it's just crazy that stuff happens. And so I want you to understand that it's not a walk in the park, okay? But it's easily manageable, okay? And that's what we need to remember. So let's talk about some of these things. Let's talk about the fact that we also lose our self-esteem when we have these episodes. There are times when we can be confident. There are times when we can be outstanding leaders. There are times when we can really, really show up in a major way. And when we have these emotional flashbacks, it makes us feel very, very low, to the point where we have no self-esteem and no confidence. And, this contributes to us getting into the role of a victim and continuing to be in environments where we're abused by people. Because, any predator that is out there roaming the earth, it smells weakness. Okay, when we look at predator animals, they usually go after the weak. They don't go after the strong. And so we need to understand that we can actually put that off to society, that, hey, here's somebody that I can get away with treating like crap, right? And so we need to understand that sometimes this puts us in that role as well. And so the more we learn to manage these things, the more we're able to counteract that as well, and to be less of a victim, and to be less of a person that is in a role of being the abused or the mistreated. Okay, it's okay to do, it's more than okay to do what Scripture tells us, and to turn the other cheek if your enemy slaps you, or to forgive 70 times 7. That doesn't make us weak. That makes us very, very strong. This is not about that. It's not about being the bigger person, or being the better behaved, or not stooping to the level of your oppressor. These are all very positive things. Okay, these are not the things that make you a victim. Okay, being a victim is when we literally have no boundaries against oppressive behavior, and we just take it. We're literally a punching bag or a doormat or any of these things, and we know that that's not who we should be, and it's not who God wants us to be. Okay, we have to be very, very strong. If you're a person of faith, we have to be very strong, just to be a person of faith, because there's so much that's against that nowadays as well. So I don't want you to ever equate your faith with being weak. It actually is a sign of strength. Okay, and so another common clue in a flashback that I want to talk about is that we have a huge increase in our inner critic and our outer critic. Okay, and what do I mean by inner and outer critic? Okay, the inner critic is us inside, and we are making things drastically worse. We are catastrophizing the situation. We're making it, 10 times worse. So if somebody says, "Hey, you're a dork," right? Imagine now we're yelling that through a megaphone at ourselves. Okay, so we're not just calling ourselves a dork. We're calling ourselves all kinds of different things. Okay, so we have made it 100 times worse with that inner critic. Now, when I say outer critic, this is us being in situations where we are acceptive of individuals around us treating us poorly. Okay, so as the inner critic attacks us, we are less able to defend ourselves or to advocate for ourselves from the outer critic, okay, which are people that are around us that are abusive or toxic or whatever. Okay, we need to get to the point where we can manage these things and manage the inner critic, because then we're able to put boundaries up and say, hey, you know what? I know you're having a bad day, but you're not going to treat me like this, okay? And I'm going to give you a personal example, which was a major breakthrough for me. Was, I'm dealing with my elderly father, and for the longest time in my life since childhood, he has been an oppressive force. He has been somebody that has made me feel bad about myself, to question myself, to have low self-esteem, all of these things, to just never feel good enough, right? And so then when the role reversal happens and you become the person that has control, instead of that person, you have to get to a point where you can empower yourselves and create boundaries, okay? And so one of those boundaries is when he gets on the phone and he gets excited and he starts to scream at me like he did when I'm a child, I have to be able to take some deep breaths, and I have to be able to pause, and I have to be able to say, Dad, look, I know you're upset. I know you're going through a lot, but you can't scream at me, okay? You can't treat me that way. If you're going to continue, I'm going to have to hang up the phone until you calm down, and then we can have a discussion, okay? So I don't have to be aggressive. I don't have to be stooping to his level and coming back at him with anger or emotional immaturity in any way. I use my tactics. I breathe, I calm my own nervous system down, and then I make a decision right then and there that you screaming at me is not conducive to a solution, okay? We are not fixing any problem, okay? All we're doing is escalating it. You are getting more and more amped up, which is not good for you physically, mentally, and spiritually because of your age, and I'm shutting down. So I'm losing the ability to solve whatever problem that you have right now, because I can't even get outside of myself to think to solve the problem because you're crushing me, right? We talked about that word crushing. And so by learning how to manage the flashback, we are getting to a point where we can set some healthy boundaries, and we can do it in a very passive, polite, emotionally mature way, okay? And so you come out of this a much better person. You come out of this more confident, and the shame subsides. And the reason why the guilt and the shame subside is because you did it in a healthy, mature way, right? So I did not come back at the person with the same stuff they're throwing at me. I did not spew the same venom back at them, okay? So even if doing that eliminated the problem, I'm going to have some guilt and shame later, right? I'm going to be like, man, why did you do that? Why did you stoop down to their level, okay? And then you're going to have some guilt and shame that, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to strike back and hurt that other person, because, we need to realize that, especially when it's a parental figure or somebody that you're in an intimate relationship with, we love these people, okay? I use love figuratively because love is a difficult concept for CPTSD. So I'll say that we love them the best way that we know how, if that makes sense to you, okay? So there is a relationship there. Even though we've been oppressed and even though we've been abused, we've talked about this before, there is an inherent loyalty to the caregiver or to the intimate partner. There's a loyalty there, and there's a love there. Whether it's a healthy love or not, it's there, and we need to realize that. So you are going to have some guilt and shame if you come back at that other person the same way they came at you. And so what I'm trying to give you is a very well-rounded, holistic approach to not only create a healthy boundary with this person, but also to do it in a way that you can feel good about yourself, okay? And as you do these things, you're going to build more and more confidence. So now maybe it's not your parent screaming at you. Maybe it's a boss at work that is just treating you inappropriately, okay? You mess up and you have consequences. That's fine. There's discipline, whatever. But maybe this person's having a bad day, and they have discovered at some point that you are the guy or the gal that they can mistreat. They can vent to you. They can beat you up a little bit, because you're the path of least resistance, and you'll take it, right? And we don't have to be that person. We can acknowledge that they're having a bad day. We can offer support to them, but we can also tell them, hey, that doesn't excuse you treating me in a way that I don't deserve, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? That creates a healthy boundary, and it helps them understand that if they come at you that way, they're not going to get anywhere, okay? Because you're either going to walk away, or you're just going to shut down the conversation. You're not going to be able to solve any of their problems or help them, right? And so this is a healthy way. It is not a hostile way of doing things, okay? And so I want you to think about that. That's very important when we're de-escalating these situations. So we have talked about in the look at my notes here. We have talked about in the past couple videos about acknowledging that you're having a flashback. Now we're talking about we need to name it. Okay, so there is a difference in what we're talking about. We've talked about reminding ourselves that we're not in danger, that we're safe, that we're not in the situation, so we're grounding ourselves. We've talked about the right and the need to have boundaries. Today we're giving you some actual solid ways to create those boundaries in a healthy way. We've talked about speaking reassuringly to the inner child that they are safe and that you're going to look after them, and that, I'm not this little child anymore that has to fear. And today I want to talk about what we call destructing eternity thinking, okay? And this is important. This is something that goes along with what we're talking about with acknowledging the flashback, with being able to set up some coping strategies, to be able to set up some healthy boundaries so that you can regain some control and self-esteem. Now I want you to realize that after we do that, we also need to do some self-talk to ourselves, and we need to realize that we can't do this eternity thinking, because what happens is, as a child, when we have this fear and this abandonment, it feels endless. It feels like it's never going to end, because you are desperately wanting the affection, the nurturing, the structure, the boundaries, all of these things that our caregivers are supposed to give us, so that we can learn and develop and be able to face life. And so, unfortunately, there's many of us that not only didn't have those things, but we had the exact opposite, which caused even more damage. And we will talk about this in the future, that we're talking about epigenetics here. We're talking about the literal physiological state of us, and the actual chemical state, and actually the brain itself developing in a different way due to this. So this is a big thing, okay? And I don't say it's a big thing to scare you and to make you think that there's no hope. I want you to understand that it's not small, it's big, so that when you're fighting this and when you're trying to heal, you don't get to the point of hopelessness or surrender, because you need to understand it's a big thing. Now, can it be dismantled? Can you get better? Can you thrive at life? Absolutely. Okay, and that's what this whole channel is about, is that we're going to go over the painful stuff, but we're also going to teach you that you can do something with your life positive, and you can overcome these things, and you can be stronger than you've ever been. And that's an amazing thing. And so as a child, we think that the fear and the abandonment are permanent, that they're just never going to end. And this carries into adulthood. We end up with anxious and ambivalent disorganized attachment strategies. And so we end up thinking that everyone is going to abandon us. We think that every relationship is going to end badly. We think that everyone we meet, everybody we care about, is going to hurt us. And so this carries on and on and on, and it's quite the curse, okay? And we need to understand that we have to start working on dismantling that, and we need to understand that, there is risk, okay? Humans are humans. Hurt people hurt other people. Sin happens, and we need to realize that there's always a risk to opening yourself up to somebody and trusting somebody and loving somebody, okay? But if we learn about ourselves and we learn what healthy looks like, the risk goes down because we are able to choose healthy people to be part of our life that we can trust, that are not going to hurt us, okay? And so it's possible, and we need to realize that, because if we look at it as everybody's going to hurt us, then we are going to isolate and we are never going to heal, okay? So we need to understand, as comfortable as it is to hide in our little bubble, we do have to get out of it, and we do have to realize that we need support from healthy people to be able to do this. My faith helps me tremendously, but I've met some key individuals in life that also help me tremendously, whether that's colleagues, other people that have CPTSD that are doing the same thing and being able to overcome this. There are people out there that can support you and that will not harm you. They will do their best to not harm you. I'll put it to you that way, because no one's perfect, but they will not do it in a malicious way. And so we need to understand that with risk does come with a reward. And we're going to get to that in later videos on how you can look at that. But I just want you to think about that. This is one of the things we have to start thinking about if we're going to get rid of the that internal feeling that it's never going to end, that this is my life forever. It's always going to be fear. It's always going to be abandonment. It's always going to be pain, right? So part of this is we need to remember that the flashback is going to pass, okay? So each time that flashback passes and dissipates, we are literally giving our brain evidence that is very supportive of a new, healthier belief, okay? We're giving our brain the evidence that this isn't eternal, okay? Because the flashback passes, we come back, we end up, feeling better, we conquer that episode, and we actually get stronger and more resilient when the next one comes, okay? So that is the number one way that we can get out of this eternal thinking, is that the evidence is literally right in front of us that it isn't eternal, because these flashbacks end, okay? When we got out of that abusive home, or we got out of that abusive relationship, guess what? It ended, okay? And maybe we kept on in a pattern in abusive relationships, which is very common. But we need to realize that that wasn't something that was meant to happen. It wasn't, seen in the stars. It wasn't our destiny. It's not what has to happen, okay? These things can dissipate. These things can be overcome. And it happens every time we manage one of these flashbacks. So I think that's enough for today, for this video. I've given you a lot to think about. I've given you a lot to chew on. If you have comments, if this reached you in a certain way, if it's a negative comment, if you say, hey, Dr. Capps, you're full of crap, it doesn't matter to me. Any feedback you give us on the podcast or on the video is welcomed. We're here to help people. We're not here to harm anyone. And I'm also here to walk beside every brother and sister out there that lives with CPTSD as I do, because as a team, as a village, as brothers and sisters, we can truly overcome this even more together. And you, just like myself, can turn your pain into purpose, and you can help others. And instead of the curse of this continuing on, we can actually start a new legacy of healing and helping and loving others as Christ would have us do. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, God bless. Keep safe, and remember what you're learning and deploy it in your lives. Bye. Thank you.